Hello, everyone. My name is Mike. My pronouns are he, him, and I will be the GM for a session of Trophy Gold. We are going to be running through the incursion Hester's Mill, which was written by Jason Cordova. Like I said, my name is Mike. My pronouns are he, him. I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a long time. We're playing mostly with members from the Happy Jacks RPG community, but this is not an official Happy Jacks actual play. It's just a community. It's just a community game that we are running because I've been kind of an evangelist for Trophy for most of the RPG communities I'm in, and it wasn't super well known here, so I volunteered to run, and I actually got some players, and so here we're going to go.
I had not heard of it until Mike.
So I've been playing tabletop RPGs for a long time. I started when I was a kid back in the early 80s. I played a lot of D&D in the 80s. I played a lot of GURPS in the 90s. I also played a lot of Call of Cthulhu in the 90s. In the aughts, I got back into D&D with 3rd edition, played a lot of D&D 3rd edition, and then Pathfinder, until I kind of felt like I was getting buried by the weight of the Pathfinder rules. And in 2015, my long-running Pathfinder game kind of fell apart, and partly because I was really feeling the weight of the rules, and my GM style I found that the Pathfinder rules were fighting my GM style. So I took a brief break, and then got invited to a game of Dungeon World, which was my first experience with story games or powered by the apocalypse game, and that game just broke my brain in a good way. And I've mostly been swimming in the story game and narrative focused RPGs pools ever since then. I've been a member of the Gauntlet online gaming community for a while, and that's where this game more or less came from. And I'll talk a little bit about the history of this game and the nature of it in a little bit, but I've prattled on quite a lot. I joined the Happy Jacks RPG community through the back door about, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago. I actually hadn't heard of the podcasts at all, but I was Kimmy, who's the leader, and so Kimmy, who's in charge of Happy Jacks, and I happened to be interacting a lot on the Magpie Games Discord, and she invited me to join, and I hopped into the Discord, and then realized, like, there's a whole lot of really cool people, and they're doing some really cool things over there. So I've been kind of active in the HJ community, and it's been a lot of fun. Okay, I've yammered about myself a whole lot. Let's go around the table clockwise as you appear on my screen. So, Vyrrk, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Vyrrk on the internet. My real name's Christos. I have been in the RPG community for actually not a super long time. I think 7 years or so. And I'm very sorry, but this is under my 10th time ever playing as a player. So I have run literally countless amounts of games in 8 years, but this is with under one hand, like 2 hands. So good luck, guys.
Awesome.
I'm excited to play.
Awesome. Glad to have you. This is going to be awesome. I hope you have fun with this. Cool.
Sure.
Curt, would you say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Curt, pronouns he, him, and I've been playing role-playing games for about 35 years, probably. Started off like D&D Red Box stuff when I was like 10, 11 years old, and I kind of fell away from it when I moved to Alaska. Like, I wasn't really, didn't think there was a community that actively involved, and then I started listening to just podcasts and stumbled across Happy Jacks and just immediately fell in love with just the way that they approach games, the way that they kind of talked about like narrative focus and all these things that I just really missed in role-playing games. It lit a fire in me again to get going. And we organized JackerCon happening, like first one was probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And getting people to, like, they're all talking on, at that time, it was just a regular forum about what they loved about games. Actually get down and play games together was just such a cool experience. So it's been really positive, and this handoff that's happened from Stu to Kimmy has just been awesome to see. Like, she's doing such a great job, and I'm really glad to see JackerCon still evolving and taking an active role, and then to see like things happen in the off season. That's kind of my hope always, is that you get all these people that are just really passionate about it and have all these great ideas, that play games I've never played. I have seen from afar, like Trophy. I've wanted to play it, but never had a chance to. And so I'm really excited. So yeah, thanks.
Well, cool. I'm glad you wanted to give this game a chance. And again, I hope I present this pretty well. I've run Trophy a fair amount, so I think I know what I'm doing, but hopefully I'll be able to convey that. I'm sorry. Before we got on camera, I forgot to ask what people's names and how they wish to be introduced. Mack, you?
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
I'm Kevin. I also go by Mack or Macku. I got into tabletop gaming, short stint in D&D 3.5, from there to VTM, from there to Exalted, and then I story told for Exalted for about 8 years. Got out of it when I went into college and came back to tabletop gaming when COVID sent us all inside for several months. Remote gaming suddenly became a thing. Since coming back, I've found myself hanging out in the Eberron community, and then through a series of events, came to the Gauntlet, where I've been playing around with Trophy in Brindlewood Bay. My first Trophy was actually a Rooted in Trophy hack that was a Regency romance novel hack of Trophy, where instead of getting vanished into the forest, you fall hopelessly in love, and it was a very fun version of the game. And then I've since played another Trophy, very much closer to actual Trophy Dark, but this is my first Trophy Gold incursion, so I'm excited to see the differences there.
Yeah, if you've played Trophy Dark is a horror game. That's the sister game to this one. Trophy Gold is a game that's designed for campaign play. Mm-hmm. Cool. Glad to have you. And Erica, would you please say a few words about yourself?
My name is Erica. I just go by Erica Odd online because I'm odd. And my game group calls themselves the Order of the Dice of Doom, so that's ODD. So my experience is similar to like Mike or Curt. I've been playing for a long time, 40 years. Started on first edition AD&D, like when I was 11 or 12 with the neighborhood kids. And if basically pick a popular role-playing game from the last 40 years or so, and I've probably played it. I have not played GURPS. I don't know if that's going to get me banned from the Happy Jack server, but maybe not now that Stu's not running it anymore. I did a little bit of Champions, of course. I never played second edition D&D, but I was heavily into third edition, 3.5, and Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, Rollmaster, Palladium. I've been everywhere. And my current jam is Savage Worlds. That's I probably started playing that about 10 years ago, when, much like Mike, I just kind of got fed up with Pathfinder. And I found Savage Worlds through an online friend, and I've just kind of been playing that ever since. And oddly enough, it's come back around now that Pinnacle has introduced Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. I am in a Pathfinder for Savage Worlds campaign. We're about halfway through the Rise of the Rune Lords. So
I ran the full Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path for Pathfinder First Edition, not long after Pathfinder First Edition came out. So I was doing the conversion because the original was written for D&D 3.5, and so I was I was converting it to Pathfinder kind of on the fly. But that was that was like more than 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah. So we have just fought. I don't know if you remember how much you remember of it, but we just dealt with the ogrekin in the farm.
Oh, okay. So you're in book 3, Hook Mountain Massacre.
Like the start of the third book, I think. Yeah. So.
Right. Yeah. That's the one that's a scenario that's more or less based on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, wrong turn, that kind of, crazy mountain people kind of.
Alrighty, but we are here to play Trophy Gold. So thank you for joining, and thank you for signing up to play this game. I've been really looking forward to it. I always love to introduce Trophy to new players. I would have to say that I think I play more Powered by the Apocalypse games these days than I do any other game family. But I will say that I think Trophy Gold is currently my favorite role-playing game right now. That may change, but this one's really up there. It just, for me at least, it just hits my sweet spot. So I'm going to do a little. So let's talk a little bit about Trophy. So to start with, I like to do a little exercise to start, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. This is a little exercise called CATS, which stands for concept, aim, tone, and subject matter. It's kind of like the elevator pitch of the game. So the concept of Trophy Gold is Trophy Gold is a narrative-focused story game that has a lot of old school Renaissance like DNA in it. So one of the design goals for this game originally was to use like modern like rules light story game techniques that you could use to run like OSR or traditional like dungeon crawl modules. Trophy has all of the elements of a traditional like dungeon crawl adventure. It's just that it kind of like mixes them up a little bit and presents them and presents them in kind of a different way. It's almost like it's deconstructed. It's almost like a deconstructed game. The other thing about Trophy, it is highly collaborative. We'll be regularly hopping in and out of having discussion like in character, where I'll be addressing your characters' names. And the mechanics will also have us like step out of character and have some discussion and like make decisions about what direction we want to take the story. So we'll be constantly hopping back and forth from like being in the game and then taking a step back and being in the fiction. So if you've played Powered by the Apocalypse, PBTA does that a little bit. This one does it even more so. The genesis of Trophy Dark, it originally started out as a hack of the game Cthulhu Dark, if anyone's familiar with that game, but that's like this super lightweight game that was originally designed to do like Lovecraftian horror stories. It uses the more or less the basic die mechanic of that game, and we'll talk about that once we get to the rules a little bit. This game also has this game is also based on Blades in the Dark, so it's got some Forged in the Dark elements. The big, if you've played a Forged in the Dark game like Blades in the Dark, this game very heavily uses the Devil's Bargain mechanic. It also uses Forged in the Dark style dice pools and dice results. So if you've played Blades or if you've played Cthulhu Dark, you've played this game's like 70% Cthulhu Dark, 30% Blades in the Dark. So if you've played either of those games before, it should be more or less familiar. We'll talk about the rules in a little bit. So that's the concept of this game. This is a collaborative story. This is a collaborative rules light story game that is there. That's designed to basically take a story game approach for like OSR style dungeon crawls. This particular incursion is going to be more of a it's structured like a dungeon crawl, although you are going to be mostly outside. So Hester's Mill is in this adventure. You'll be trying to find a legendary abandoned town and find its secrets. In Trophy Gold, all of the player characters are they are desperate treasure hunters. You're really doing this in order to like find treasure, mainly because and why are you poking around these strange and desolate and dangerous places to get gold? Because that's your best option. You're doing this because safer, more lucrative options just aren't available to you. And when we get into the game mechanics a little bit, your characters are all very treasure motivated. One of the rules of this game is you have a debt score. It's called your burden. You must gain at least as much gold equal to your burden before you can go back to town. Because if you go back to town without being able to meet your burden, your character is removed from play because your debtors catch up to you, and that's going to be the end of your adventuring career. You can always go back to town at any point, but you must meet your burdens.
It's good escapist fantasy.
Yep.
It's buried in debt.
So that's the that's the kind of high level concept of this game. So the aim of this game is to tell an interesting story about these characters. And again, in this particular adventure, like I said, you'll be going into you'll be trying to find an abandoned town, and once you find there, you're going to basically try to find as much treasure as you can, and also figure out what the mystery is, and also solve the mystery of like why did this once prosperous town, what happened to it? Concept, aim, tone. The tone of this game is mostly pretty serious. This game has some horror. This isn't a horror game per se. That would be Trophy's sister game. This would be Trophy Gold's sister game. Trophy Dark is the horror game. But this game does have some strong horror elements. I'd like to mostly keep it. I'd like to mostly keep this serious. But we certainly will have moments. We'll have moments for some like lighter weight or for some humorous interactions. But for the most part, I'd prefer us to not do a whole bunch of not jump into Monty Python jokes, or when things get horrific, I'd really appreciate it if we could all kind of lean into the horror rather than try to make jokes out of it. So that's tone. Subject matter. So trophy incursions are all built around a theme. I'll just tell you right now, the theme of this adventure is harvest, both literally and figuratively. So this particular adventure is going to have themes of reaping, agriculture, but it'll also have reaping. It'll also have themes of birth as a metaphor. It may have themes of there may be some scenes that have to do with pregnancy. Just hop back over to make sure I'm not forgetting any of the content warnings. This game also deals with religion and religious fervor and religious fanaticism, and cults, demons, and human sacrifice. Those are the content warnings. So that is concept, aim, tone, and subject matter of this game. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Awesome. So the next thing I want to talk about is emotional safety at the game table. I sent a link to in our Discord. I sent a link to our character keeper. Is everyone in that right now? If not, I can pop that into the chat. Okay, if you're.
That's the Google document?
That's the Google Sheet.
Okay, I'm in there.
Okay, cool. So if you could hit on that first tab that says info and safety, we're going to talk a little bit about emotional safety at the game table. So, safety. When we play a role-playing game, we're pretending to be someone else, and we're, experiencing, for the most part, we're experiencing the world through the eyes of our character. And we're, poking through we are poking through a fantasy world and doing hopefully interesting and fun things. But sometimes it's possible. We're all human, and sometimes your brain doesn't know you're acting. Or your brain doesn't know that you're, like what your character is doing isn't what you're doing. And there's an emotional connection between you as the person and you as this character that you're playing. We're a bunch of strangers or near strangers who've gotten together to play this game on the internet, and the purpose of this game is to have fun. But each of us individually is more important than this game we're playing. Safety tools are here to mitigate the potential of tripping on each other's different. Well, each of us have different lived experience in the world. There may be subjects that you might find that you have no problem talking about and are just perfectly normal subjects. Some of those subjects I may have some difficulties or issues with some of those topics. Safety tools are a way that we can try to we can't eliminate the risk of tripping over like emotional landmines, but they give us some tools to maybe put a few flags in them so that we know not to step there. And if we get too close, we have some other tools that we can use to sort of like right the ship and make sure that we don't go into a place that we don't want to go. We're going to be using a layered approach here to safety. I'm going to be using 3 different safety tools. The first one is the most basic, and that's going to be called the open door policy. And open door means we are all free to come and go from this game as we please. Anyone can call a break at any time. Anyone can step away from the game for any reason and come back when they're ready. Whether that means you need to step, and again, if you need to call, you need to call a buy a break, you need to step away, get a glass of water, just call a break. If someone comes to your door and you need to, or if you need to answer your landline, say, hey, I got to take this. Step out, come back when you're ready. Open door also means that each of us is fully empowered to come to the conclusion that, you know what, this game isn't for me. I'm going to take the rest of my evening back, and this game isn't for me. I'm not really having fun here. To which case, the rest of us say, "Cool. Sorry, the game wasn't to your liking. I hope we can play something. I hope we can play something again in the future that's more your speed." I do ask, if you do decide to step away and not come back, if you would let us know that you're not planning to come back so that we don't wait for you. But if things are getting that bad that you really need to duck out, that's I guess fine. Any questions on open door before we move on? The second tool that we are going to be using is called lines and veils. Lines and Veils was invented by game designer Ron Edwards for his game Sorcerer back in the mid-aughts. With Lines and Veils, we are going to call out specific subject matters that we either don't want to deal with at all, or that we only want to deal with under limited circumstances. If a subject is lined, that means we are not going to deal with it at all in the game. I'm not going to bring it up. You as the players aren't going to bring it up. If that subject, I am running from a published adventure. If that subject matter was in the adventure, I will, as the GM, I'll just write around it. If a subject is veiled, that means we can acknowledge that this subject happens in the game world. We may find signs that it has happened. We may hear other non-player characters like report that this sort of thing can happen, but it is not going to happen on camera, and it is not going to happen with one of the player characters. There's a third layer. There's a third category that's been added to Lines and Veils more recently. It's called Ask First, and that indicates a subject that may be okay to deal with in some circumstances and may not be for others. So if you wish to assign a topic as Ask First, that just means before any of us introduce that element, we'll pause the game, have a quick out of character discussion to make sure that to like put some bounds around, like, so that we know, like, is it okay if we go here? Is it okay if we bring this up? And if it is, cool. And if not, we'll put different bounds around it and not go there. So on our character sheet, or on our character keeper, I've got a list of a number of topics that people will often line or veil or ask first. This is a living document. There's a bunch of blank lines as well. So if people have other things that they'd like to add, you can certainly add that. And this is a living document. If anything comes up during play that we want to add to the lines and veils list, we certainly can. I'm going to pause the recording right now so that we can talk about our lines or veils, but these are for us. They aren't necessarily for our viewers. So I'm pausing the recording now. Okay, we're back. We have established some lines, veils, and ask first. I've taken the time, I've copied off our lines and veils onto a stick note that's floating at the top of my screen so that I won't take my eye off of it. Any questions about lines and veils before we move on? Okay, so the third safety tool that we're going to be using is a reactive tool that is called the X card. When you invoke the X card, you're telling us that there's something going on at the game that you're just not comfortable with, and that you don't want the game to go there. You can say the phrase X card. If you're on camera, you can make like an X gesture with your arms. Or you can just say X card, or if you don't even want to say X card, like you can just say like, oh, hey, well, folks, we need to pause, because that's what the X card does. When you invoke the X card, you're telling the other players that we need to pause the game because there's something going on that you're not comfortable with. It can be anything. You can X card anything that you're not comfortable with in the game. That could be something mundane, like I've introduced an NPC that was the name of the bully that used to beat you up when you were in 3rd grade, and you absolutely hate that name. You know what? That's a non-player character. They don't really exist. We can call them whatever we want. It could be, you could invoke the X card if you think we're starting to head toward a line or a veil. Sometimes in our enthusiasm of play, we might take our eyes off of that, and in our enthusiasm, like go in a direction that we really shouldn't be going in. If any of us sees or feels that we're heading toward a line or a veil, please invoke the X card, and we'll write we'll write the game. It could be that someone has introduced a fictional element that you're not comfortable with, or you just don't think you think the tone is off, or you just don't think that fits with the established fiction. X card, and we'll do something else. When you invoke the X card, that means we're going to pause the game. We're going to have a little discussion as to what needs to change. You don't have to tell us why, but we do need to know what. And then we'll figure out what to do. We could maybe we'll like rewind the scene and replay it without that element or with a different element. Maybe we'll just like fade to black here and like pick it up at the next scene, or maybe something different. Again, we'll figure it out. Two things I do like to call out about the X card. You can certainly use it in game. You can also invoke the X card if there's things going on not in the game, but at the game table. For example, if someone is regularly mispronouncing your name, talking over you, telling you how to play your character, misgendering you, anything that's happening like between the players, you can like invoke the X card, and that just means we're going to have a discussion about that like rational adults, and make sure that this isn't going to happen. It's rare for that sort of thing to happen. Every once in a while, someone may be the player behavior I see that does get X carded is like when people sometimes in their enthusiasm they will talk over another player, and if that happens, the X card is a great tool to like draw that behavior to everyone's attention to make sure that it doesn't happen. One other thing I like to mention about the X card is if something has happened in the game that you didn't really like, but you didn't think was that big a deal, so you decided to let it slide, and then it happens again, it is absolutely 100% okay to X card something that's like a reappearance of a game element that you let slide earlier, whether it's the second or the third or the fourth or the ninth time this thing has happened. It is absolutely okay to X card it, even if you've already let it go. That is the X card in a nutshell. Any questions? Cool. So this isn't exactly a safety tool, but one other thing I like to One other thing I like to mention is if something happens to me such that I, look concernedly off to my left, take off my headphones and walk off camera, or like the meeting like abruptly ends, or I freeze and don't unfreeze, that would probably indicate that something has happened on my end, whether that was a technical issue or, something bad happened. If I leave and don't come back for 10 minutes, and I don't communicate what's going on through some other means, assume the game is over and take the rest of your night back. I wish I could say that has never happened, but I was running at Gauntlet Community Open Gaming back in September, and we just concluded the safety talk, and I was just starting to just explain the rules of the game when my neighborhood experienced a power outage. And it didn't come back for 45 minutes. So I had to like text via my phone, like, hey, sorry guys, no game. I don't know when my power's coming back. So hopefully that won't happen. But if I'm gone for 10 minutes and I don't let you know what's going on, the game is over, and take your night back. This concludes our safety discussion. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, Erica, it looks like you're talking, but you're muted.
I keep forgetting. I'm sorry.
No problem.
I have an elder cat who gets sick a lot. The cat I showed you when I first came on, Ash. He's 13. He's getting up there. So sometimes he gets sick. So, but if I have to go clean something up, hope that's not a line for anyone.
And if you need to go, like, if something's going on in your house that you need to take care of, take care of it. This is a game. This is like real life is more important than this game we're playing, and that's what the open door policy is for. Okay, so that concludes our safety talk. Let's talk a little bit about Trophy. As I briefly alluded to earlier, so the game Trophy was written by Jesse Ross. And one of the design goals of the game was to use like a modern rules light, narrative first story game approach to old school dungeon crawling or old school adventuring. So this game is, I find a fascinating, I find this game to be a fascinating hybrid of story games and the old school Renaissance. So the OSR elements in this game are, like using the environment to your advantage, like poking around. I mean, I don't want to do, not like the AD&D first edition, like Tomb of Horrors things where you like have to go pixel bashing in order to figure out the thing. But, there's no like perception check in this game. So if you want to do the thing, you need to describe what your character is doing. But at the same time, this is a collaborative story game. So so this game is story first. There are game mechanics such that the players will be introducing new narrative elements that may take the story in unexpected directions. So the way we do this is, and I'm just going to go over briefly, and I'm going to very briefly talk about some of the rules of the game so that when we go to character creation, we can make some informed choices. So this game uses D6s of two different colors, referred to as light dice and dark dice. Generally, using dark dice. Using dark dice is more dangerous, but it does increase your chances of success. And oh, Kevin, I have a cat that looks almost exactly like yours. Except mine does not like to be picked up, so she probably won't be on camera. And you're muted if you're saying something.
I say she's probably not going to stick here long, but.
No, my photogenic cat is all black, and she may show up, but I don't know where she is right now. There are a number of different kinds of roles in this game. The two you'll be using most often there's one called the hunt roll. And I'll be calling for the hunt roll basically whenever you are asking questions about the world or are poking around to try to glean more information about things. I'll be calling for a hunt roll. you may get you may get some information on a successful hunt roll. You will also get a meta currency called a hunt token. These are not physical tokens that you're finding in the game. This is a meta currency. When your character gains hunt tokens, you can hold on to them for as long as you like. However, if you it is possible on a hunt roll to lose all of your accrued hunt tokens. So there's a bit of a there's a bit of a user lose it aspect to hunt tokens. At any time, you can exchange. You can declare. At any time, you can declare. You can hand in one of your hunt tokens and declare that you found a treasure that is worth 1 gold. Gold is the in-game currency. That's that's what you're trying. That's what you're trying to do. And the way the hunt roll works is take 1 die take 1 d6 if you are asking questions about the world. Take another d6 if you have if one of your skills or if you have a piece of equipment that will help you. So generally you will want to roll this on 2 dice. And hold on, my landline. Sorry about that. My landline rang. Yeah. So generally in this game, you're going to be assembling a dice pool and you're going to be rolling them, and you're going to look at the highest individual single number that you rolled. For a hunt roll, if the high number you rolled is a 6, you gain a hunt token. If your highest number rolled is a 4 or a 5, you encounter something terrible and gain a hunt token. If the highest number rolled is a 2 or a 3, you encounter something terrible. And if the highest number you rolled is a 1, you lose all of the hunt tokens that your character was currently holding, and you encounter something terrible. Something terrible might be a monster. It might be signs of a monster. It might be a trap. It might be information you wish you didn't. It may be simply information that you didn't want to see. The rule of thumb is generally the lower the number you roll, the more terrible the thing is that you encountered. So if you roll a 1, that probably means you're going to encounter a monster. There is a combat roll. We'll talk about combat once we actually get into combat. The other roll that we'll be rolling a fair amount of is called the risk roll. This is the roll when you attempt to do something risky and failure has consequence. I'll call for a risk roll. So the way the risk roll works is when you attempt to do something risky, tell us what you hope will happen, and then ask the GM and the other players, no, what could possibly go wrong? So the GM and the other players will then set the stakes for the roll, depending on what you do. So ultimately, it's the GM's call as to what will happen on a failed roll. But the GM and the other players will toss out possible stakes as to what could happen if the roll doesn't go so well. So once we've established stakes, the player who wants to roll, the player wishes to do that, they can back down then if they want to, if the stakes are too dire. Because in a risk roll, depending on fictional circumstance, the worst that could happen could conceivably be instant death. Like if you're trying to climb up a 100-foot tall cliff, what's the worst that can happen? Well, you could plummet 100 feet to your death. Or if you're trying to jump over a lava pool, you could fall into the lava. This game doesn't really have hit points, but we'll get to that in a moment. So once we've established stakes and you wish to press on, we'll then talk about dice and assemble a dice pool. Take 1 die if your character has a skill or a piece of equipment that can assist you. If you don't have a skill or a piece of equipment that can assist you, you don't get that first die. You can take another light die if you accept a devil's bargain. If anyone's played Blades in the Dark before, it works more or less identically to the way Devil's Bargains work in Blades. I'll talk about that in a moment. And finally, you can choose to add a dark die to your pool if you are willing to risk your mind, body, or soul to succeed. If you are using a ritual, that's the magic system in this game, you must include a dark die. Also, the GM can declare that what you're trying to do is so inherently risky that they may require a dark die in that. You then take all your dice and you roll them, and we're looking at the highest. We're looking at the highest number that comes up on any one die. If the highest number is a six, that's a full success. You get what you wanted, and I'll ask you to describe like how you succeed. If the highest number you get is a 4 or a 5, you succeed, but there's a complication. I will declare the complication. I will probably be using the like some of the potential, the potential things that could go wrong to inform my decision as to what that complication is. So I'll generally describe the complication, and then you describe how you succeed. Or alternatively, if you want, you could conceivably, describe the complication, and then we'll figure out how you succeed. So basically, that's like Empowered by the Apocalypse. That's more or less the success with a cost or success with a complication. And if you get a 1, 2, or a 3, that is a failure. That means you don't get what you want, and the situation is going to worsen in some way. That's where we're going to pull those stakes in. If you are unhappy with the result of your die, and the highest die you rolled did not come up on the dark die, you can add another dark die to your roll and re-roll. And again, if you don't like that result and the highest number was not a dark die, you can add yet another one and re-roll. The problem with adding dark dice is your character has what's called a ruin score. Ruin indicates how much hold the forces opposing you have over you. Your ruin generally starts at 1, and if you get to 6 ruin, your character is out of the game. Your character has been overcome by whatever dark forces are opposing you, and has ravaged your mind and or body. If your character gets to 6 ruin, your character is out of the game permanently. They may run screaming off into the forest. They may become a creature that is an adversary. They may simply die. We'll figure that out. That is appropriate. If a character does hit 6 ruin, that's going to be a big thing, and we'll take a moment to have that scene to write that character out. Your ruin is only going to increase when a dark die is involved in a roll. If a dark die is higher than if a dark die is the highest die in a roll and it is higher than your current ruin score, your ruin increases by 1. So if you've assembled a dice pool of, say, 2 dark dice and 1 light die. I'm sorry, 2 light dice and 1 dark die, and you roll it. The high number is a 5 on the dark die. That's still a 5. That's still a success with complication. But we'll then compare that 5 on the high dark die with your current ruin score. And if that is higher than your current ruin score, your ruin increases. There is a way to reduce your ruin score in the game. That's called the reduction roll. And we'll talk about, and we will, hold on a moment. Am I getting ahead of myself? I'm getting ahead of myself. Next, that reduction roll. The reduction roll is for Trophy Dark, and that the reduction roll doesn't come into play here. There may be ways in game that we can reduce ruin. There's occasion you may occasionally encounter magic or other things. We'll talk about that a little. We'll talk about that when the game
Is there a pretty high character death rate? Is that how
it can be?
Yeah.
It can be. there's a, there's definitely some push your luck mechanics.
Right.
The hunt roll and the risk roll, those are going to be the two most common rolls. There is a combat system, unlike in Trophy Dark, where if you try to fight the monsters, you automatically die. You can fight monsters in Trophy Gold. There is a combat. There's another die roll called a combat roll, and we'll talk about that when we actually encounter combat. The two things about combat that I will mention is, in order to engage in a combat roll, you must have a weapon that is appropriate for the kind of combat that you wish to engage. Like, for example, if you want to go toe-to-toe with somebody, you need to have some kind of a melee weapon. Armor also comes into play. If you take a hit in combat, you can mark your armor to avoid taking the hit. And hits in combat increase your ruin score. We'll talk about the combat roll once we actually get into combat, because that's not strictly relevant at this point. But I did want to talk about the hunt roll, and I wanted to talk about the risk roll. Those are going to be the rolls you're going to be doing the most often, and those are the ones that some choices on character creation will come into play. Devil's bargains, I did mention that. So whenever we call for a risk roll, you will have the option to take another light die by accepting a devil's bargain. So a devil's bargain is a new fictional element that will come into play regardless of the result of your roll. So you generally phrase a devil's bargain as saying, like, well, for this devil's bargain, no matter what, ... and then whatever that thing is going to be, like, for example, so the devil's bargains don't necessarily have to have a direct impact on what you're doing. Like, for example, this is a really mundane example, but let's say that you're being chased by monsters and you have to, like, hop over and you have to, like, jump over a ravine. That would probably be a risk roll. So if you were to entertain a devil's bargain, and this is kind of a not great example, but, like, you could say, like, well, no matter what, you lose your sword, and your sword like will fall to the bottom of the ravine, no matter what. That would be a good devil's bargain, because regardless of the outcome of the roll, your sword's going to be at the bottom of the ravine. Now, that could be because of a failed roll that you and your sword are now at the bottom of the ravine. But even if you succeed, you've lost your sword. What would not be a good devil's bargain in that case would be like, well, you're hanging on the edge of the cliff. That's not really that's not really a good devil's bargain, because that's predicated on the outcome of the die roll. It could also be something that has nothing whatsoever to do with the jump. It could be that, well, no matter what, we're going to encounter this, like, enemy from your you're going to encounter an enemy from your past on the other side of this ravine. Or no matter what, there's more monsters on the other side. That would also be a so with devil's bargains, the GM can offer them and the other players can offer them. It is up to the player who is rolling to choose any one that they like. If they mostly like one, but would like to change that a little bit, we can certainly get into a little bit of a bargaining here. Like, well, I kind of like that, but could we tweak it a little bit? That's totally fine. Or you can decide that, I don't like any of these. So yeah, and if you don't like any of them, you don't have to take that dark die. It's really up to you. I'm sorry, that light die. The devil's bargain gets you a light die. So that was the hunt roll, the risk roll, devil's bargains, and I talked a little bit about hunt tokens. That's kind of like really high level rules. It'll make more sense once we get into play. I just did want to explain that a little bit so that we can make informed decisions on character creation. I know I threw a lot at you there. Any questions before we move on? And again, it'll make more sense once we actually come into play. Okay, let's talk a little bit about character creation. So this character keeper is pretty cool because it kind of walks you through the process. Trophy gold characters don't have a lot to them. Your character has characters don't really have stats per se, but you do have skills. So you're going to so your character is going to start out with no gold, because you need gold, because you need to meet your burdens. All trophy gold characters start with at least one burden. That is how much gold you must you must bring back from your mission to pay your debts. Let's see. Your character, you'll get to choose an occupation that is what you're currently doing, and your occupation is going to grant you 3 skills. You're going to choose a background. That's what you used to do. That's going to give you another skill. So your character is going to be starting out with 4 skills. You're also going to choose a drive, and that is what you're trying to do. What is it that you're trying to accomplish that you need to get all this gold for? When you choose your drive, and there's like pick lists that you can do, it's going to mention like a lot of like proper nouns, names and places and things. And you may want to say, well, what is the Rose District of Ambaret? And the answer is, well, there's an implied setting in this game, but it's not really canonical. So in fact, it's a specifically anti-canon setting. So we can figure out what that means in play, because I don't know. I may ask you like what is the swirling court that you wish to join? I don't know. I'll turn that back to you. What is the swirling court that you wish to join? One other thing that your character may have are called rituals. Rituals are magic spells. They're deliberately designed to be kind of vague. There are a lot in the game, and there's a mechanic we're probably going to use that I'd like to use that's going to like cut down on the number of decisions. Basically, we're going to roll some dice, and you're going to basically get a choice of you're going to basically get a choice of 3 rituals that you could choose to learn, and you can choose to have and you can then pick from any of them that we've rolled. Knowing rituals is bad for the soul because magic is bad. For every ritual that you know, your starting ruin increases by 1. So if you do not know any rituals, your ruin starts at 1. If you know a ritual, your ruin starts at 2 and can never go lower than 2. And you can max out at having 3 rituals, which means your starting ruin is 4 and can never go lower than 4. Remember, you're out of the game at 6 ruin. So if you start knowing three rituals, your ruin can only go up by 1, and then if it goes up again, you're out of the game. At the same time, rituals are very powerful and they're very useful. They're also dangerous. Using a ritual is not a guarantee. This isn't D&D. In order to cast a ritual, you must make a risk roll. So rituals can backfire. And the other thing about rituals is you must include a dark die when you cast a ritual. Because rituals are a risk roll, you must, in order to get that extra light die, you have to in order to get that first light die, you do have to have an appropriate skill to cast the ritual. There are some professions that give you rituals as a skill, and like for example, one of the occupations is sorcerer, and that will give you rituals as a skill, which means you will get that 1 light die. Others may be more arguable. Like for example, if you have a skill of agriculture and you have a plant-based ritual, I would probably take an argument that that skill would help. But again, rituals they're powerful. They're deliberately worded to be vague, so we'll have you describe what you want this ritual to do along like the one line description of what the ritual does, and we'll take it from there. So that is that's some kind of high level stuff that we'll talk that I wanted to talk about and get on camera. We're now going to go into the actual character creation, and that's terrible radio. So I'm going to pause the recording while we actually build our characters. So I'm going to pause the recording now, and we'll come back once we have some characters. Okay, we're back. We have some characters. So before we do the introduction, I just want to talk a little bit about how a trophy incursion, that's what they call a scenario in trophy, is called an incursion. Talk a little bit about how an incursion is structured. Incursions are structured in what are called sets. And a set is basically, it's a group of people, places, things, generally grouped geographically somehow, that are all tied together in a certain way. Every set has a solution. So that's kind of like a thing you need to do to solve the set. I, the GM, will tell you, the players, what it is, what the set goal is. So for some sets, you must meet the set goal in order to proceed to the next one, where others you don't necessarily have to solve the set goal to proceed. It's going to kind of depends on the set. But I will tell you what you need to do to solve the set. And even if you solve the set, it's possible to come back and you may not have found everything that there is to find in that particular set, but solving the set means that you've basically hit certain narrative, you've hit the narrative goal for what that set is there for. And again, I will tell you what the set goal is as players. Your characters may not necessarily know that, but you'll know that as players. And there's two ways to solve the set. You can solve the set by the traditional role-playing thing of poking around and doing the thing, or you can pool hunt tokens. You can trade in 3 hunt tokens to solve a set. Why would you want to do that instead of trading them in for treasure? Well, there's a couple of reasons. For one, it kind of short circuits the set goal, where instead of you having to poke through and face dangers and possibly monsters and traps, I'll just tell you how you solve the set narratively. So you're not exposing yourself to danger. You're also not necessarily exposing yourself to treasure if you're doing it that way, but that's a way to advance the game quickly by using that hunt token meta currency. I find that in play, players are more likely to spend hunt tokens to solve the set later in the game when your characters are starting to approach 6 ruin, because that's the safe way to advance. It's you can move quickly. The downside is you're not exposing yourself to as much risk, but you're also not exposing yourself to much reward when you're solving sets by just spending hunt tokens. But it's absolutely an option, and it can move the story through quickly. If what you're trying to deal with is really dangerous, or you're getting up into your ruin scores, that would be a way to progress. And again, you can always spend hunt tokens to gain treasure as well. So I will tell you what the set goal is as GM to players. Again, your characters may not know that, but that's that is the narrative goal of what these sets are. So this adventure is going to have 5 sets, and we're going to be starting out in a set called Torin's Bend. Anyway, getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, how the game is structured before we actually got going. So, let's introduce our characters. Anyone like to go first, or I could just go in character keeper order, unless if anyone's dying to jump in. Otherwise, okay, let's start with Curt. What is your would you please introduce us to your character?
Okay, so Talia, she, her pronouns. She is a ranger who at some point was bitten by a huge black wolf that eventually proved that it was some sort of lycanthrope of some sort, and she became, and it was attached to this cult of wolf pack. And then she eventually became a werewolf as well, and then cured herself of that by having the hide flayed from her body. And so as the hide, again, if it gets too squeaky, let me know. But so that hide is what she now wears as her armor, and she chooses to channel her energies to still pull in that spirit of the wolf, while still maintaining her humanity. So yeah, that's Talia.
That is metal as fuck. I love that.
Oh, and to be clear, it is squicky, but I'm not veiling it or anything. I was just I was reacting like, oh wow, that's harsh.
That's rad. I like it.
That is fantastic. I love that. What is Talia's drive?
To resurrect the cult of the Darwan. So she realizes that there's uses for this power, that even though it corrupted her to a point, like it's gotten to her world has become dark enough that she needs to lean into the darkness.
Awesome. Very, very cool. I'm really, really looking forward to learning more about Talia. Erica, would you introduce us to your character, please?
She is Sarah. She is an unmasked Feyborn, which I'm interpreting as being kind of like a changeling. You know, a Fey creature left with human parents to raise in the mortal world. And once that was found out, she became an oracle, using her magic to receive visions and divine prophecies for the townsfolk. And her drive is to become part of the Swirling Court, which is one of the Fey courts that she has to regain the favor of to get allowed back into the world she came from, and be an oracle for the Swirling Court.
I love it. I'm just gonna toss this out there. Every game of Trophy I have ever played, someone has chosen become part of the Swirling Court as their drive.
Yes.
And everyone has been 100% completely different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, once I chose the
I love
Unmasked
it.
Feyborn, I saw Swirling Court, and that just kind of sounded like a Fey kind of thing. So. I figure the Swirling Court is like maybe a court of springtime. So the swirling is like falling flower petals and that kind of thing.
I love
Actually, no, with her colors, maybe it's autumn. So the Swirling Court is falling leaves.
Nice.
I love it.
Yeah, that's
I
the
love
picture
it.
I chose.
Yeah, I see that. And I'll go back to Curt and ask this question as well. What could you tell us what rituals you have chosen?
I took Wail and Channel. So Wail is a howl, Wolfpack howl, and Channel is the spirit of the Darwan.
I love it.
Wow.
And what are Sarah's rituals?
Guide. I can conjure a golden thread to follow to a location. Medium. I can get surface thoughts of nearby creatures, or the surface thoughts of nearby creatures enter and overwhelm a target. And Bind, which holds a person or animal in place.
think, give me just a sec. I think there's a, I think medium is just I think there's a problem there. Let me just,
Okay.
I'm gonna pause the recording briefly. I just want to make sure that I got this right. I'm gonna, because I think that, I think that's two descriptions that somehow got bled together. I just want to grab the book and I just want to make sure it's right. I'm
Oh,
going to pause
okay.
the recording real quick.
Just fervor be part of this thing.
And I stand corrected. I'm thinking of an earlier iteration of the game. So yes,
Okay.
surface thoughts of nearby creatures enter and overwhelm a target. Yep, that is indeed
Wow.
the
Sort of like
description of
a like
medium.
a telepathic assault kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yep,
cool.
exactly.
So that's not exactly what a medium is, but hey, that's how the game defines it.
Well, let's just say there's an because I'm playing with the like the released rules now, which have
Sure,
only been
yeah.
out for about 6 months. But I've been playing Trophy for like 2 years using
Oh, wow,
using the earlier edition, and some things have changed. And that one, the medium ritual is basically more like ESP, where you like reading minds.
Right.
But yeah, this is cool. And again, I just wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure that this change was correct, and it is. So. And it looks like you also have bind, hold an animal or person in place. Very, very cool, very creepy, and seems like they are all the sort of things that a Feyborn would have access to. Cool. Kevin, would you introduce us to your character, please?
Absolutely. So this is Revel. He was at one point the storybook paladin. He was a knight errant. He quested across the countryside, fighting evil and helping and being a force for good until he went up against a cultist and a cult that managed to sink deep and dark curses and wove them the threefold binding of his heart and placed a geas upon him. And since then, he has had to serve sort of as their as a dark rider. And now he has gotten just enough of his ability back to have a glimmer of hope at breaking that geas. But he has been working as a sellsword to try and break that binding upon him. His ritual is smite from his old days as a paladin. Actually, I think conversely, he was just an ordinary knight, but in part of the geas, he was given a supernatural ability to burn the things that he struck with a dark and unholy flame.
I love it. That's fantastic. And finally, Vyrrk, would you tell us about your character, please?
Yeah, so Cab is a defrocked priest. His occupation is sorcerer, but that's not exactly right. He is a priest that was diving into information, trying to find out more, and ended up finding out too much and found out things that he ought not. Things that were connected with the darkness and the things that crawl at night, right? So of course whatever the main religion is here, one of freaked out, said no, you can't be part of it. So I was rejected, but I am still wearing the gear, and I am still going around presenting myself as such, even though I am, and I'm telling everybody I'm out to like restore the temple of this Tenelot. But in reality, I'm trying to create something to a temple to another cult, which I think would make a lot of sense if it was Talia's cult, that cult of Darawan, which I think would be kind of a cool thing if you're cool with that, Curt.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I love it. I'll
Yeah.
talk since we got some religions here. I'll just mention this is like an anti-canon setting, but one of the like broad strokes is that in this world, people venerate these supernatural beings that are referred to as the saints. Most of not all, most of the saints are depicted as being female. So many of the saints, most of the saints are frequently called the sisters, but they are like goddesses of various. They aren't all, but most of them are. They aren't all female, but probably most of them are. Yeah, there are various saints of various things. It's kind of like a pantheon.
Yeah.
And I'm mentioning that because a saint is going to play a role in this adventure. So our adventure. You are trying to find the village of Hester's Mill. And here's what you know. So over a century ago, so Hester's Mill is in an area called Torin's Bend. Torin is a great river, and it does this big bend around. And this area was once a floodplain, but the river's moved sufficiently far that it doesn't really flood here anymore. But the soil is very, very rich, and this is a very productive and this had once been a very productive and very fertile agricultural area. But over 100 years ago, Torin's Bend was ruled by a usurper lord called Galdrin. Galdrin was a heretic, and he routinely defined and he frequently defied and mocked the teachings of the sisters. Specifically, he specifically seemed to have it in for Saint Hester, who is the saint of the harvest. And Saint Hester had been the most revered of the saints in this region. Again, primarily an agricultural area. Hester was the saint of the harvest, and was therefore the most popular and most revered god here. And one of the larger settlements was the town of Hester's Mill, named for the saint, which was also one of the site of Saint Hester's like primary holy areas. However, according to the legend, the people of Hester's Mill were said to be like religious fanatics. And again, according to the stories that you've heard, again, 100 years ago, the people of Hester's Mill eventually grew so disgusted with Lord Galdrin's heresies that they ultimately rose up against him. They overthrew him, and they burned down his keep. They murdered his soldiers, and really just enacted this like massive bloodbath. These, farmers and peasants somehow are able to overcome like a warlord and his sellswords. However, the sisters and Saint Hester in particular became so appalled by the villagers and the people of Torin's Bend turning to such like horrific violence that they cursed Torin's Bend. The land fell fallow. The land fell fallow. The harvests, the harvests failed, and ultimately the people had to abandon the village because they weren't able to grow enough food to keep them, to keep the populace fed. And so the people abandoned the village of Hester's Mill and Torin's Bend in general. Eventually, the curse seems to have lifted to a certain extent, in that Torin's Bend now, like the area seems to be fertile again, and there are and it seems to be perfectly capable of supporting farms, but no one's really moved back. People are too superstitious to repopulate. And so the once fertile fields are now completely overgrown and are starting to return to forest. So you believe, you have heard that Hester's Mill and its surroundings contains abandoned buildings, abandoned valuables, and abandoned treasures that are just there for the taking. So that's why you have if you've decided to cast your lot together and head into Torin's Bend to try to find the lost village of Hester's Mill and basically loot what you can from it. That is what you know. Looking at the time, I would normally do a little vignette that just kind of like establishes a little bit of relationships. Looking at time, I think we're just going to hop right in if that's okay. And we can figure out our characters. We're just going to say, for the sake of argument, your characters have been traveling together for, I'm going to say that you met back in, I'm going to say that you met back in a border town called Fort Durin. But you've been traveling for, you met up in Fort Durin, and I'm going to let you figure out how you established your relationships, but you decided that you all had similar goals and that you all decided to set off to try to find Hester's Mill together. And you've been traveling together for you've been traveling together for some time. If you want to say that your characters had known each other for longer than that, that's fine. We can figure that out. We can figure that out in play. But you've been traveling together for a while. You know each other, and at this point, I'd say you mostly trust each other.
Mostly.
Mostly.
You trust each other enough to travel together and set watches and whatnot. So we are now in the first set. The set is called Torin's Bend, and the set goal here is to find the road to Hester's Mill. Let's see here. I'm going to read the box text here. So the region known as Torin's Bend is so named because its northern border is a semicircular bend in the titanic Torin River, is almost entirely uninhabited, despite the fact that it's some of the most arable land in the continent. Its formerly bustling roads are all long overgrown, and the area hasn't been reliably mapped in decades. So I'm going to say it is. So you've been traveling for a few days, and you are now in the air. You know from the maps that you have, which again, maybe decades out of date. It's kind of hard to find landmarks. And it's early autumn. It is the time of year where had these fields, and as you're walking along this, as you're walking through this land on what you're pretty sure was a road at one point, even though it's pretty well overgrown at this point. You're looking over these fields now that are grown up with, there's small trees that have grown up in what had once been harvested fields. But you're still seeing, just double check something here. But you are still seeing, you're still seeing signs of that. You're still seeing signs that this place was once cultivated. There's still signs, and I'm going to let's do a little paint the scene here. Cab, what do you see on your journey that indicates that the area that you're wandering through right now was once was at one time rich agricultural land?
I think there's a lot of water ditches, a lot of aeration ditches that are going like crisscrossing across the land as we're going. They've long since been overgrown, and there's a lot of, you can tell most of them don't have water going through them anymore, but they were definitely there for a reason.
Okay, so irrigation ditches, obviously artificially constructed. I love it. And as you know, as you're walking along one of these irrigation canals, you do see that there is a, you know, the field behind it. Again, there's a few small trees that have started to grow up, but it looks like, you know, it looks like this had once been a cornfield. In fact, there's still a whole lot of, at this point, semi-wild, but there's still a fair amount of corn that's growing in here. You know, the stalks, you know, they're not, you know, they're not in neat rows anymore. They're just kind of like haphazardly grown. But yeah, there's quite a few corn stalks. And even from like the overgrown road, you can see that some of these stalks have like large ears of corns that are still growing on them. And as you continue up this remains of the road, you see ahead of you, in an area that's not as overgrown as you think. You think that, and what you're walking on was clearly once. There's a lot of stones in the area, and some of these stones are quite round, and they're not too, and they're, you know, they're buried in leaves. But you're now walking on what may have once been cobblestones. There aren't a lot of plants here, and kind of in the center of this clearing, there's a statue on a plinth.
Oh, go up and examine the statue. As one of my skills is gods.
Okay.
Is it a deity of some sort? Maybe one of the saints, or Hester herself, maybe?
Well,
I'm
I think
also
it
going
is.
to be following up behind her, just kind of like walking along, kind of like following the person that obviously has a plan here, but I'm just kind of like staying close by, keeping an eye.
Well, I think, well, since you are asking questions about the world, it is, sounds like we are going to have our first actual roll of the game. This is going to be a hunt. It's going to be a hunt roll.
Okay.
Because you are asking questions. So let me just hop over to our reference
And
tab where the
just
rules
as a
are.
side note, I've put down there under notes after your description. I would revere Saint Hester as the saint of the harvest, because the swirling court is an autumnal court in the Fey realm, so she is important
Nice.
to those people.
So when you press deeper in your pursuit of your goal, or ask questions about the world, you're asking questions about the world here. Tell us what you're doing to explore the environment.
I approach the statue, first examining the base of it to see if there's any carvings or any name that would make this easy.
Okay.
And you know, maybe if there are some vines growing up on it, maybe kind of clearing the vines away to get a better look at the features or any sort of iconography that might give me a clue as well.
Okay.
You know,
So
if this is indeed Saint Hester, we may be in the town square, or at least very close to Hester's mill.
Got it. Okay, so we're gonna have our first roll of the game. This is gonna be a hunt roll.
Okay.
You take one light die for asking questions about the world, and you can take an additional light die if you have a skill or piece of equipment that will make your search easier. And
I've got
think,
God's rituals and trances are my skills, but I don't really have any equipment. Let me see what I've got.
yeah, and again, you only get one die for having either skills or equipment. So
okay. Yeah, none of my.
So it sounds like we're going to be rolling with 2 light dice.
Okay.
So you're only ever rolling two light dice max.
For a hunt roll, you're only going to be rolling either 1 or 2 dice, and they're both light dice.
Yep. A
So if you
3
want-
and a 1. I encounter something terrible.
Okay. And if you
Escalated
want to,
quickly.
got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's fine. You use the risk. If you scroll down, there's a hunt section of the die roller as well, which would
Mhm.
just roll light dice.
Yeah, and I selected that. So
Oh, okay.
I
It's
got
not
two
showing
light,
on my.
two light dice, a 3 and a 1.
Oh, okay.
It's
Why
all
is
the
it
way
not
down
showing
towards the
on?
bottom. I can't easily scroll very well on this.
Yeah, that's.
I have to hide the. 'Cause, yeah, scrolling all
hide
the
the
way down.
roll.
Scrolling all the way down. I can't see my dice completely, but I can tell that's a 3 and a 1.
Got it. Yeah, that's weird. It's not scrolling properly for me. Yeah,
I
I thought
found that
they
if
would
I
have.
click the rolls button, so the side panel goes away, then I can scroll freely up and down. But if that thing on the left is out, then I can't scroll.
Yeah, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go. Huh, that's weird. I'll mention that to the programmer. Okay, cool. So you encounter something. So you encounter something terrible.
Mhm.
So I'm going to tell you, just by looking at the statue.
Hey, Mike, before you tell her,
Yeah.
is there like a help mechanic in this game in any way, or is there anything that's like connected to that? I missed that if that was a thing.
I didn't talk about it because but yes, there is a help mechanic. The help mechanic only comes into play during a risk roll when there's a dark die in play.
Got it.
You
Okay.
can, there is a help roll, and the way that works is if you wish to help another hunter, another treasure hunter, and that other treasure hunter is making a risk roll that includes at least one dark die, you can offer to help before or after they roll. And the way that works is, so if the other player accepts your help, tell us how you are helping and how you are exposing yourself to the same danger. You can then roll. You then roll a light die, and the other person rolling can choose to use your light die when they're looking at their own pool. However, if your light die matches any of their dark dice, then your ruin increases by 1.
Oh.
So for example, if you're helping and you roll your light die and say you get a 5, the other person rolling can look at can include your 5 in whatever their dice pool is, which could would be a success. But if they rolled a 5 dark, then your ruin would increase because your die matches. Let me just make sure I got that. Yeah, if your die matches any of the dark dice rolls, your ruin goes up by 1. So
Interesting. Okay.
the more dark dice the other person is helping is throwing, the greater the odds of both of your ruin going up.
I like that. Screw with fate. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. It would seem
and-
like an appropriate time to ask.
Yep. No, absolutely cool. There's also it's a different mechanic. There's also a contest rule. We'll talk about that if like 2 hunters are trying to do the same thing at once, or if somebody is trying to prevent another person from doing something. There's another die mechanic for that. That one doesn't come up nearly so much in Gold as it does in Trophy Dark, which is the horror game. Okay, so I will tell you, however, that the statue, at first you thought it might have been a statue of Saint Hester because the arms of the statue are in the positions that they would be for most ritual, for most of the rituals, most of the ritualistic depictions of Saint Hester. But it's wrong. For one, once you get up close, it's weathered, but this statue is clearly that of a man. The other thing is it's posed similarly to Saint Hester, but because normally with Saint Hester, The arms would be crossed over the chest, holding a sickle in one hand. That would be holding a sickle in one hand and a cornucopia in the other. This one is depicted in the same way, but instead of the cornucopia, this statue is holding a sword.
Hmm.
And it's clearly a man, not a, it's clearly a man depicted.
Very unusual. I'm not familiar with this deity.
Yeah, you know,
Murderous bounty.
it may not, you know, it's possible it's not a deity, but it's kind of hard to say. Because as you were like trying to pull apart the vines, looking for a as you're trying to pull apart the vines, looking for a name on the plinth or something like that, it's like really overgrown in there, and too late you hear a too late you hear the you hear the rattle of a rattlesnake,
Oh,
and you've clearly disturbed a rattlesnake, and you see not 18 inches. I'm going to say that you probably got down on your hands and knees to try to like pull the. So you're on your hands and knees, and not 18 inches from your left elbow, there is a rattlesnake coiled, its head up, and it looks like it's about to strike. What do you do?
well, it looks like I'm wearing a very large witch hat. So I would kind of basically try to snatch the witch hat off my head and kind of like wave it away in one direction to get the snake's attention that way, away from me,
Okay.
to give me the opportunity to get away without risking a strike.
Okay. Awesome. So this is going to be another roll. This is going to be a risk roll.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're using your big old hat to try to like shoo the snake away. So what could go wrong here? I mean, I'm going to throw the obvious one. I'm going to say what could go wrong here is the snake's going to bite you, and you're going to take the poisoned condition. Does anyone else have any ideas as what could go wrong here?
Snake's gonna get stuck, its fangs stuck in her hat. She's gonna have to deal with it.
Anyone have any other like possible possible stakes? I mean, I think I think the obvious like really go wrong is like you're going to get bit by a poisonous snake.
That's the worst one. Yep.
Bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may use some of the others as like potential. I may use some of the others like as potential complications. So we've established some stakes here. Do you wish to press on and do you wish to press on with this roll, or do you want to try to do something else?
Well, we're in the closing stretch of tonight, so I think I'll press on with the roll.
Well done.
Okay.
Let's see what happens. Let's
Fantastic.
try this. Let's try
Okay.
this system out. Take the training wheels off.
There we go. So do you have any skills that could help you here?
Well, I have. I don't know if illusions would matter. If I could, make the somehow use illusions to make the hat look a little more tempting to the snake, so it would strike at it instead of me.
Well, I'm also going to say if you want,
I do have the bind ritual that would hold the snake in place.
That's true. That would be casting a ritual. I mean, then we instead of what you're doing, if you wanted to do the ritual, we could then do a ritual instead. The other thing I'm gonna pose, if you want to define one of your pieces of backpack equipment as as a big floppy hat, or as a big witch's hat.
Sure.
We could say you can get a light die for using that as your piece of equipment.
Okay.
But we'll need to define that.
Could
Okay.
you lean on your Fey background and your trance abilities to actually have a staring contest?
That is, if you want to try. If you want to try to do that, that could
I
My snake
really
charmer.
like the scene of a snake and you just like closer,
Yeah.
closer.
I have trances as a skill, so
that.
Staring contest with a
basically-
snake?
Sure,
What
why
could
not?
possibly go wrong?
I am 100% for, I'm 100% for that. So if you want
So
to,
is that
so if
still
that's the
a
approach you're
risk roll?
taking,
Okay.
it's still a risk roll, and you're getting
Huh?
a light die for that.
Okay.
My next question is, would you be willing to accept a devil's bargain?
Do it, do it.
And how does that work again?
So the way the devil's bargain work is, I and any other player could pose like a new fictional element in the game, and the way that goes is like, no matter what, this is going to happen.
Okay.
And if you accept this, and if you find one that you like and you accept it, you can get another light die for like accepting this devil's bargain. And
Okay, sure, I'll do it.
so I'm going to pose.
I did say take the training wheels off, so.
I'm going to pose that no matter what, there's like a, no matter what, there's, no matter what, you discover that there's a big nest of snakes nearby.
Okay. Put us all in
Anyone else,
danger.
if
Okay.
anyone else, and it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with snakes, but if anyone else wants to toss out a potential devil's bargain, all of the players have the ability to pose one. Anyone have any ideas that they'd like to toss out?
Nothing really I can think of at the moment.
What about no matter what, snakes become we find out that stakes are a huge issue in Torin's Bend. Like this is like a thing that we're gonna be
Fested,
dealing with.
yes.
Perhaps why it's not being repopulated, they come back here, but they keep getting bitten.
Right.
I
Snakes
do
love
kind
it.
of like that. Like no matter what we discover, that there are, there's something very snaky going on around here.
Snakes in the mill.
Mhm.
Many snakes.
Okay, I'll take
So we
that.
got-
I'll take the bargain. I like
You'll
the snakes are a recurring issue. Here.
Snakes are a recurring theme. Okay.
No one put a veil or a line on snakes. It's not even on the list. So.
Snakes.
I
Why'd there
roll- I
have to be
roll-
snakes? Okay. So we've got.
I am
so
awful
we've got.
tired of these snakes in this bill.
Okay, so we've got 2 light dice. I'm not going to
Okay.
require a dark die here. So let's do a risk 2 light.
Alrighty. I rolled a 4. So what? I'm sorry. What does that indicate?
Okay, so 4 is a success. It's a success with a complication.
Okay.
I'm going to say the complication is. Oh, okay. Let's go for this. So you succeed in not getting bitten by this snake. But oh yeah, let's go. Oh, let's do this. I'm going to say the complication is you don't get bitten by this. So you're like doing this. So you're doing this staring contest with the snake, and you get this, and you put the snake in the trance. And I'm going to say that the complication is the snake. The snake, like very quickly, like lunges at you and gets in your backpack,
Okay.
and then you can't find it.
Okay.
So
I
that's
guess I have
so-
a snake now, everyone.
Snake in
Well,
the
I
back.
mean, so that's going to be the complication, is that there's
Okay.
a snake on you somewhere, and I'm going to give you the condition I'm going to give you the condition like, where's that snake? Question mark.
Okay.
You're not bitten, but you're going to have that condition. Now, if you would like, you can add, you can say, you know what? I don't like that condition. I want to add a dark die and re-roll all the dice to try to get
I
a
kind of like
6.
that condition. I've already put it on the sheet. So
Okay.
it's like, oh, okay.
Okay.
I might have to ask one of you to reach into my backpack next
There is infested with snakes.
Did we
So
see all this go down? Like the three of us, or was this like kind of in the bushes? We couldn't see it.
I'm going to say if you want to have seen that, you could have. I'm going to leave that up to you if that's something you would have noticed. And I guess before we answer that question, I will ask each of you. So while Sarah was like rooting around this statue, what were the rest of you doing?
I think Cat was like looking at the statue, like kind of like
You were
walking
also
around
looking
it
at the
real
statue.
slow, trying to.
Okay.
Yeah, because I said
Okay.
I followed her, and I was like, I think I was kind of like
Okay.
also like looking around it, trying just to see what was going on.
Okay, so I'm going to say you could have witnessed this whole thing if you wanted to. What was Talia doing?
I think she probably heard the rattle and was very clear what was going on there. So then quickly she looked around and started noticing all the holes everywhere, and started to assess the infestation level of this area.
Awesome.
And whenever she's like checking things out, she definitely is like on all fours, sniffing the ground. Like she has the wolf head as kind of a hood that goes low, and she's almost indiscernible from an actual wolf when she's doing all that stuff.
Love it.
Nice.
And what was Revel doing during this?
Revel is keeping watch for other hostiles, since we're now in unknown territory. Okay,
cool. So I think, given looking at the time, I think we're going to end this session here. And we'll pick it up. We'll pick it up here next week, and see where this takes us.
Make City.
I like it.
So
very cool. Very cool. A lot of fun.
So I'm gonna end the recording here. Bye, anyone who is watching. If you folks would like to stick around, I like to do a little debrief. Take a couple of minutes for that, but I prefer to do that off camera. So we're going to end the recording. So we are going to end the recording here.